Positive Obsession. Written by Octavia E. Butler. An obsession, according to my old Random House dictionary, is the domination of one's thoughts or feelings by a persistent idea, image, desire, etc. Obsession can be a useful tool if it's a positive obsession. I saw positive obsession as a way of aiming yourself, your life, at your chosen target. Positive obsession is about not being able to stop just because you're afraid and full of doubts. Positive obsession is dangerous. It's about not being able to stop at all.
For Octavia Butler, positive obsession was writing stories. When asked by friends as a teen what her superpower would be, Butler's answer was to live forever and to breed people. Her characters play through this fantasy again and again, either as people forced into breeding projects, or as the children of breeding experiments, or sometimes as the breeders themselves. Butler wrote stories about power, about getting power. One of the reasons I got into writing about power was because I grew up feeling that I didn't have any, Butler explained. A Black woman raised by a single mother in California, Butler had radical dreams of the future. One of these dreams is manifested in the power-seeking, obsession-driven protagonist, Lauren Oya Olamina, of Butler's Parable series. Her obsession? To take root among the stars. The Parable series is Butler's quieter, live forever story, using religion instead of superpowered aliens to ensure the human species survives. The series, containing both Parable of the Sower, 1993, and Parable of the Talents, 1998, is the fictional biography of Lauren Olamina, told through Lauren's own journal entries. Set in dystopian 2024 America, her world is threatened by climate change, political unrest, and violence. There is starvation, disease, and poverty. Lauren grows up in a walled community in a suburb outside of Los Angeles, protected from some of this uncertainty. Outside of the walls, doped-up pyromaniacs set fires that burn across the Southern California landscape. Murder and abuse are common. God is change, Lauren writes in her journal. Shape God. These maxims are part of Earthseed, a new system of thought that the then teenage Lauren invents in order to keep the human species alive. The first novel in the series, Sower, begins with a 15-year-old Lauren as she leaves her childhood home and sets up her first Earthseed community, Acorn. The second novel, Talents, deals with the destruction and enslavement of the Acorn community by Christian radicals, the community's escape, and Lauren spreading and building new Earthseed communities until her death. My mother lived to be 81, her daughter writes in the novel's epilogue. She never stopped teaching. Lauren sets up Earthseed grade schools, then colleges. She provides scholarships to poor students with the goal of populating other distant worlds. Earthseed teachers or shapers shape and influence others towards their common purpose, the colonization of different planets. The Earthseed schools are a response to the growing lack of access to education. In this book's universe, public education has all but disappeared, privatized or outsourced to corporations that are new forms of indentured labor. More than half the country is illiterate. It's another story concerned about education. Here's Butler on this.
I think I was paying a lot of attention to education because a lot of my friends were teachers, and the politics of education was getting scarier, it seemed to me. We were getting to that point where we were thinking more about the building of prisons than of schools and libraries. And I remember while I was working on the novels, my hometown, Pasadena, had a bond issue that they passed to aid libraries. And I was so happy that it passed because so often these things don't. And they had closed a lot of branch libraries and were able to reopen them. So not everybody was going in the wrong direction, but a lot of the country still was. And what I wanted to write was a novel of someone who was coming up with solutions of a sort.
That someone, again, is Lauren. Lauren comes from a family of educators. Her father and her stepmother, Corey, are both teachers with PhDs. Her father is the minister of a church inside their neighborhood walls and a professor at a college outside of the walls. Their home doubles as the community church and school, where her father preaches from their front room on Sundays, and Corey teaches classes to the neighborhood kids during the week. Teaching surrounds Lauren, and indeed, she wants to be a teacher. Given any chance at all, teaching is what I would choose to do, Lauren reflects. But Lauren has another teacher, her disability.
People tell me my face doesn't show them what I'm feeling. My sharing has been a hard teacher. Sometimes people say I look grim or angry. Better to have them think that than know the truth. Better to have them think anything than let them know just how easy it is to hurt me.
Lauren's a hyper-empath, a sharer.
I feel what I see others feeling, or what I believe they feel. Hyperempathy is what the doctors call an organic delusional syndrome. Big shit. It hurts, that's all I know. Thanks to Paracetamol, the smart pill, the Einstein powder, the particular drug my mother chose to abuse before my birth killed her, I'm crazy. I get a lot of grief that doesn't belong to me, and that isn't real, but it hurts.
Lauren's hyperempathy syndrome is effectively a pain syndrome, although she can feel pleasure too. There just isn't a lot of it around. Welcome back to Diagnosis Grad School. In the last episode, we took a good hard look at Victor Frankenstein and his creature's educational journeys, and we identified an eerie theme of disabled people being relegated to the shadow locations of learning. And I suggested that the obsessive pursuit of knowledge within academic institutions may be putting our health at risk. In this episode, I want to think about how non-visible disabilities function within educational systems. Unlike Frankenstein's creature, or Eric, aka the Phantom of the Opera, Lauren Olamina isn't visibly physically disabled. Hyperempathy syndrome is a non-visible disability. That is, Lauren can choose to hide her disability and move through the world more or less as quote-unquote normal. And for Lauren, her disability is a well-guarded secret. If her disability is revealed, it could easily be weaponized against her, meaning she could die.
Sharing is a weakness, a shameful secret. A person who knows what I am can hurt me, betray me, disable me with little effort.
We'll be touching on many themes and issues, some without concrete answers: passing, unfeeling, and disability pedagogy. We'll first take a quick look back at the Phantom, at Eric's physical mask, and its relation to the masks disabled people wear. We'll define passing and what these concepts look like in an academic setting, personal anecdotes and all. From there, I interview Emily Serra, a multiply disabled artist, designer, and educator. She talks about how her disability informed herself as an educator, and highlights explicit ways her experiences as a disabled scholar influenced her curriculum and teaching style. Throughout this all, we'll be looking at the connections between Butler herself and the disabled characters she writes. So, let's first take a step back and return to the 2004 musical film, The Phantom of the Opera. To the public unmasking scene. In the climax of the film, Christine rips off Eric's mask before the concert audience. His facial difference is revealed. The right side of his cheek and forehead features uneven, scarred, discolored skin. Cue ludicrous screaming. Unmasked and distraught, Eric sets fire to the opera house, then flees to his lair, Christine in tow, as an angry mob pursues him. "Christine, why?" he laments, before launching into another song. The Phantom sings,
"This faith which earned a mother's fear and loathing, a mask, my first unfeeling scrap of clothing."
What I take away from this song snippet is that Eric learned early on that a mask would protect him from society's hurtful prejudices. He wears not only a literal mask, but an emotional one as well. Christine's decision to publicly unmask Eric is largely done to disempower him, to break the hold he has had over her throughout the film. But it's also a violent and humiliating act. Forcibly revealing someone's disability, dear listeners, is never okay. In this episode, I want to discuss the masks disabled people wear to survive within the education system. I'm not talking about medical masks, although that may be what comes immediately to mind within the COVID era. I'm talking about another kind of mask, or what is commonly referred to as passing, a strategy that some disabled people with invisible or non-apparent conditions may adopt to pass themselves off as non-disabled, in order to bypass discrimination, unwanted opinions, or other forms of harm. And it's something that disabled people have to do a lot of the time within the university. To pass or not to pass, that is the question, to quote the late disability scholar Tobin Siebers. I'll argue that issues of passing and disclosure are central to disabled graduate students' experiences in higher education. Disabled graduate students, for example, must repeatedly make decisions as to whether or not they should hide their disability or illness, or to disclose their disability status, in order to receive accommodations. And often, these disclosures in the academy feel forced, not good. Unlike the Phantom of the Opera, Lauren's mask is never ripped off, metaphorically speaking. She never gives herself away, at least not unintentionally.
I can take a lot of pain without falling apart.
I want to read Lauren as a disabled educator, and as a disabled person getting power. What can Lauren and her Earthseed religion teach us about building better pedagogies? When Lauren's daughter Larkin meets her for the first time, separated for decades after being abducted as a baby by Christian crusaders, she describes her mother as cold, distant, unfeeling.
She stood up, staring down at me, staring with such a closed look frozen on her face. It shut me out, that look, and I wondered whether this was what she was really like. Cold, distant, unfeeling. Did she only pretend to be warm and open to deceive her public?
The word I'm interested in here is unfeeling.
Unfeeling. Different forms of refusal, disavowal, detachments, resistance, and dissatisfaction with the norms around feeling, about how you're supposed to express feeling, how you're supposed to receive feeling, and doing so from the perspective of below, from those who are minoritized.
This is scholar Dr. Zine Yao, a feminist and queer theorist at the University of College London, on what they call the politics of unfeeling. It's a survival tactic, they argue, used by marginalized people in the face of racial and sexual violence. In their book, Disaffected, The Cultural Politics of Unfeeling in 19th Century America, they write, quote, "I have been called a machine and accused of being cold. I have chosen to remain expressionless when the racist and sexist microaggressions of everyday life have been directed at me. As a woman of color, I find that sometimes the performance of being unaffected is the form of resistance that enables the immediate safety of people like me and denies aggressors the satisfaction of seeing our affectability. Many people I care about have confided their suppressions of emotions to get through situations, numbing themselves to weather exhausting onslaughts of iterative traumas, and shutting down to defend against exposure. The refusal to express feeling or emotionally respond, or what Yao refers to as the compulsory norms for expressing feeling, is, again, a form of resistance to racialized, queered, or gendered oppression. Yao offers a few examples: the frigid queer woman, the passionless black woman, the antisocial Asian. I want to add another unfeeling stock character to the roster, the emotionally unavailable disabled person, to consider how ableism influences disabled and ill feelings. I also want to connect Yao's politics of unfeeling to disability passing and disclosure. For people with non-visible disabilities, disclosing their disability status can be an exhausting and risky process. It's a process that can often be met with shame, pity, or disbelief. It takes tremendous chutzpah, disability scholar Ellen Samuels explains, for non-visibly disabled people to assert our disabilities in public settings or to ask for accommodations. Denial, mockery, and silent disapproval are some of the cultural mechanisms used to inhibit us. It is not a static or singular event, and disabled people must still make decisions about coming out on a daily basis, in personal, professional, and political contexts. For me, these disclosures have proven to be a mixed bag. They are never straightforward. In the academic context, I've had a professor tell me that no one cares about disability. I've had a university employer make jokes directly after telling them I have a non-visible illness. Others have listened and responded with offers of care, support, and much-needed flexibility for deadlines. It is difficult to predict or assess other people's biases or opinions towards disability when making such disclosures. Most of the time, I just don't have it in me to do it. I'd rather hide away. Here's a run-of-the-mill PhD disclosure story. I'm registered with the Accessibility Office at my university. It requires medical documentation, an official disclosure of my diagnosis. The registration process works like this. Together with my doctor, a detailed letter is written that breaks down how my symptoms impact me day to day and suggests what accommodations I might benefit from. A university access advisor is then assigned to me. The advisor starts asking invasive and frankly humiliating medical questions under the guise of matching my diagnosis to specific and very limited accommodations they offer. The access advisor is, well, prying. Wasn't that letter from my doctor enough? Then more disclosures follow. Special accommodation letters are emailed off to professors I do not know yet, by me, not the Accessibility Office. My accommodations are also punctuated with addendums that say, to be discussed with the instructor in advance. More disclosures are to be made. What is the point of the Accessibility Office, I wondered, as I sent out these letters? To lend my requests some small amount of credence? After 3 years of graduate school, I can't say the office has done much of anything for me. In fact, some of my more bothersome symptoms, such as fatigue, actually seem unaccommodatable by the university. But more on this in the next episode. Lauren, in the parables, appears to have similar experiences. She's called a manipulative bitch and a hell of an actor, when she discloses her disability to a close friend. It's a hurtful response to an intimate disclosure. Lauren, in turn, responds that her father had taught her early on to hide her disability.
I had to learn to pretend to be normal.
Lauren's hyperempathy also means she categorically feels too much. This excess of interior feeling requires Lauren to mask for protection. In private, Butler was similarly so full of feeling. Like Lauren's journals, Butler's own personal writing allowed her to sort through her feelings. Make people feel, she continually reminded herself. In her journals, Butler admits that she wanted to be like Lauren, writing her as an idealized version of herself. Both are tall black women, Butler was 6 feet tall, and former Baptists. Lauren's Earthseed verses are also lifted from Butler's own personal writing. Motivational affirmations, New Age self-helpism phrases, and spiritual mantras appear throughout Butler's journal entries to influence and manifest her desires. Butler's affirmation, "I shall be a best-selling writer. My books will be read by millions of people. So be it, see to it," was something she successfully manifested. Butler's other affirmations were to buy a home in a good neighborhood, to help poor black youth go to college or to writers' workshops, and to get good health care for her and her mother. Butler wrote herself in, and here I want to detour just a bit to talk about Butler, to read autobiographically. I want to think about how Lauren's hyperempathy syndrome may connect itself to Butler, because Butler has always written about disability. And also, I'm just a really big Butler fan. Disability is everywhere in Butler's fictional worlds. I first read Butler in my early 20s. I wrote 2 papers on her in undergrad. They weren't very good. The papers were, however, my first attempt at understanding the themes of disability Butler was so fascinated by. I didn't name disability outright in my writing. I wrote instead about her other beloved theme, mutual interdependence, or symbiosis, about people needing one another to survive. As an only child, Butler was painfully shy. "Shyness is shit," Butler wrote in one essay. "It isn't cute or feminine or appealing. It's torment and it's shit." Her power-seeking, overconfident, self-insert Lauren was perhaps an outlet for Butler's bold, interior feelings. Butler consistently described herself as a little bit dyslexic in interviews, but in her journals, misspelled or extra words littered the pages. She didn't like to give readings because she tended to read things that weren't there. In school, teachers believed her to be lazy or criticized her for not trying hard enough. "Oh, but I was trying, desperately," Butler explains. She hated labels and doubtlessly would have described herself as having a learning disability. "Labels bore the heck out of me," she insisted. But it wouldn't be unreasonable to read her as a person with disabling experiences. Butler also had trouble with her health, which had been impacted greatly by poverty, grueling temp jobs she took to support her writing, and unstable access to healthcare. In her journals, Butler often spoke about her health concerns. In 1973, she wrote, "I should stay healthy. The bother and worry of being sick and not being able to afford to do anything but complain about the pain and hope it goes away is not conducive to good or prolific writing." "I wish I felt well," she wrote in 1994. In 1999, again she journaled about her health. I have pains and too much tiredness. Maybe I don't have that much longer to live. By the 2000s, side effects from a medication she was taking for high blood pressure got in the way of her writing almost completely. I'm taking a medication that flattens out the world for me. It makes writing an exercise in frustration. I don't know what to do, but this is horrible. There has to be an alternative. Weeks before her sudden death, in February of 2006, she confessed, "I can't go on this way." Part of what draws me to Lauren is her decision to pass as non-disabled to survive. I say this from one pain-filled, non-visibly disabled person to another. Secret feelings explode within our bodies. Lauren's disability has also forced her to adapt to a world not built for her. The central idea of Earthseed, that God is change, is all about adaptation. And adaptation, for Lauren, is built upon the power of education to shape the future.
I'll adapt where I must, take what opportunities I can find or make, hang on, gather students, and teach.
Her hyperempathy allows her to read people easily and recruit them to her movement. Did her disability make her a better teacher, I wondered?
It wasn't until like the 70s that professors with physical disabilities, you could not be hired basically because you were considered like a fire hazard, essentially. And so like there's a very real reason why we don't see disabled educators who are open about it or who are able to unmask and be like their true identity.
This is Emily Sarah. She's an artist, graphic designer, and assistant professor at Virginia Commonwealth University. Emily teaches in the graphic design department, leading an undergraduate class called Experiments in Accessible Design. She's multiply neurodivergent and multiply disabled. Emily is calling from Massachusetts, where she's visiting family. She's talking to me from her mother's bed. Her niece and nephew are playing in an adjacent room, and her dogs, Blueberry and Olive, lounge on the floor. Emily is lucky. She has supportive colleagues. She has the privilege of being out as disabled and neurodivergent, both within and outside the classroom. She's also just moved up from adjuncting to an assistant professorship. Although Emily is openly and visibly disabled at the university, using a wheelchair or arm crutches in the classroom, she does have a number of non-visible disabilities as well. I start the conversation off by asking her about masks.
I mean, to some degree, as a teacher or as a professor, you are definitely performing. You have to be really, kind of animated and, really engaged, no matter how you're feeling that day, I think, but I definitely mask. I definitely have like an outward kind of masking public face, and I definitely have like an inward at my home public face. Even on Zooms, I have like a certain amount of masking that I do, I think. And I'm really trying to peel that back a lot more. And I've done a lot better job with it, but it definitely is, I'm learning how to be my true self more so, because I've masked my entire life, to be honest.
Emily tells me about growing up as a yet-to-be-diagnosed neurodivergent and disabled student. This gave her a good sense of how disabled students were treated in the education system. And this made her a better teacher, gave her empathy.
It was very difficult for me as a child, going to school, not getting the support that I needed, mostly because of just like the time. People didn't really know, especially for like, female identifying or women identifying individuals, that they just, ADHD, autism and stuff like that. Like if you weren't like literally bouncing off the walls, then you didn't have ADHD, you know what I mean? And like the example that I had, like people who were diagnosed with ADHD and autism in my class at the time, but they were like such classic examples that that's why they got the assistance and so on and so forth. So I would say that my disability very much makes me a good educator. I think I am a very good educator. I would say that not every disabled person would be able to. I think it's like me plus the combination of just like having empathy and the experience of like growing up with like some teachers absolutely hating me and me understanding that, even though I was like a really good kid. I worked really hard. I just gave a lecture about this the other day as a part of my hiring process to my department, saying like, teachers used to like openly just be so irritated with me and like would openly hate me, or like would openly, I would ask them a question and they would be like, well, obviously it's this. And it wasn't obvious to me because I'm neurodivergent and in multiple ways that I'm neurodivergent. So I don't always, I remember writing, handwriting, which my handwriting is awful, which now I know it's because I have connective tissue issues. So there's hyperflexibility in my fingers and stuff like that. So handwriting was always really difficult, and they thought I was making that up. And my handwriting teacher was like really irritated with me. And so she would be like, well, have a little bit of a slant to it. And then I would have a slant to it. And she was like, well, not that much, obviously. And I'm like in first grade. And she's like, so anyways, to get back to your what you said, I definitely think that having those experiences, as awful as they were, I'm so hyper in tune with how many of those awful experiences happen every single day, all the time in education, and how we need to undo that type of teaching that is very traumatic, to be honest.
I asked her if she had her own disability pedagogy.
So we have like a system that has been set up by like crusty old white guys, right? That has all been about fear, I think, and demoralization, and like the the fittest, the most creative, the most, the best are the ones that are going to succeed, and all who fail are going to fail, right? So a lot of my pedagogy is basically, having a much more relaxed approach to things, that there is no right and wrong.
Emily leads an Experiments in Accessible Design course, which investigates contemporary accessibility. Part history lessons, part ethics inquiry, and part examination of graphic design. Students learn that accessibility is forever in flux and can never be one size fits all. The class, like its title suggests, also experiments with how undergraduate courses are traditionally run.
It's very flexible, and so it might have like a few foundations, but the syllabus is not a traditional syllabus in that I'll say like, these are maybe the projects that we're going to do, but I also want to talk to you and see what you're interested in and like where you're coming from and so on and so forth. So we really kind of move into the class, and then we massage a lot of the what we do for the rest of the semester based on the students that are in the class, as well as deadlines, as well as like, you know, if there's like any major things happening in the world, we always are aware of those things. And I tell students to be very vocal with me about what's happening in their lives. Not like details, but like if they have too much happening, do we need to push back deadlines? Do we need to move things up? Does someone need more help? Is there something else that I can do? So on and so forth. So we start with that. Sorry, my dog is sitting on the bed with me right now and she's like shaking the computer. Blueberry's 200 pounds, so she's she just stuck her face in the frame. She's like, I just gotta turn around. Hold on, Mom.
Blueberry settles back down on the bed, and we continue our conversation.
So, okay, and then getting back to the course, so experiments in accessible design, it's really just that, you know, one of the first things that I talk about in accessible design and experiments in accessible design that I teach is that, you know, not everything can be 100% accessible ever. And so, and I think that is also a really important lesson. And so, we will have critiques where we'll talk about things and I'll say, how do you guys feel about this color? And so we'll have conversations about, you know, to break something down very simply. I'll say like, you know, how do you feel about this color? And some students would be like, I feel like this is very jarring for me to have this neon. And some students would be like, oh, I actually feel like it's really relaxing. And so that is like the beauty of the course, right? Is like the conversations and the quote unquote critiques that we have where we just talk about how you can have such different, you know, circumstances and how like there might be rules for something, but for one subsect of disability, something might be really great. And then for another subsect of disabilities, it might be a very difficult thing for them to experience. Yeah. So it's like the most fun ever. I love this class so much. And it's just like a lot of playing around and I say the only thing you can do that's wrong in the class is just like not doing it. But even in that regard, sometimes that's not even wrong, you know, per se, quote unquote, because there's going to be extenuating circumstances where, you know, someone has their tonsils out and they're like, I can't do this project. And I'll be like, okay, let's move on to the next one, you know? So yeah, it's awesome. I have so much fun. It's really great.
Emily describes her role as an educator as being a vehicle for questions. She gives her students foundational knowledge and then sets them off to discover, discuss, and build their own ideas. Her students have since gone on to give their own lectures, create accessible content, and become full-time artists and designers. I mentioned to Emily that if I had known of or seen disabled professors, my own educational journey would have been so much different.
Like I have students who just like, I can see just like a wave of relief come over them, knowing that I know what they're going through.
Part of being an educator, a good educator, is to help shape better futures. And when it comes to disabled futures, we need disabled teachers to help us get there. After our conversation, Emily sends me an article about disability design. It's a review of Sarah Hendren's latest book, What Can a Body Do? How We Meet the Built World. Hendren, like Emily, is interested in disability design. She teaches a course where engineering students work to devise tools for disabled people. Some of their past projects include a ramp for wheelchair dancing or a navigational cane that plays music. The book opens with a discussion of a lectern designed for Amanda, an art historian, curator, and little person. The lectern is portable and radically simple. Just 2 steps and it's assembled. Step 1, lightweight carbon fiber planes unfold on hinges. And step 2, secured into a standing position with hidden magnets. Sarah Hendren notes that a lectern is a blunt announcement, carried in the shape of an object, about who's expected to be standing behind it. People like Amanda are not expected to be behind the lectern. Neither are people like Emily. Teaching from a wheelchair, not to mention being able to get into the building with a wheelchair in the first place, isn't very common. On structural ableism, Kaya Wairia writes that disabled people are literally designed out of the classroom, from how buildings are designed, to the designing of curriculum, or even attitudes towards who is expected to be in such spaces. Quote, "We are designed out of the classroom through the maintaining of barriers to participation, and so then designed out of applying the particular knowledge produced through our lived experience to the designed world." Or, as the mad and disabled Afro-Caribbean writer Joselia Rebecca Hughes declares in her video work Mask On,
"The ableist imaginary now unthinks disabled being."
Hughes states that, quote, "We should exact vengeance against the non-disabled by leveraging their own limited imaginaries about our existence against them, and using that vengeance to get the things we want." What is clear is that spaces themselves can be disabling, and that the built world keeps disabled people out. Here is disability scholar Jay Dolmaj on this idea.
Space reproduces oppression, right? Space is like a university, right? A university as a public space is also a place that shapes attitudes and ideas.
What kind of bodies and minds make it into the university? And what kind of attitudes and ideas keep disabled people out? Back to Lauren in the Parable series.
If hyperempathy syndrome were a more common complaint, people couldn't do such things. They could kill if they had to, and bear the pain of it, or be destroyed by it. But if everyone could feel everyone else's pain, who would torture? Who would cause anyone unnecessary pain? I've never thought of my problem as something that might do some good before, but the way things are, I think it would help. I wish I could give it to people. Failing that, I wish I could find other people who have it and live among them. A biological conscience is better than no conscience at all.
For Lauren, hyperempathy functions as a sort of biological conscience, or what Butler called in interviews as unavoidable empathy. How might disability shape the world? Butler asks. Lauren shapes the world through Earthseed, and Earthseed is founded on education, on her Black disabled pedagogical visions.
One of the most valuable things they traded with one another was knowledge. Every member of Earthseed learned to read and to write, and most knew at least 2 languages, usually Spanish and English, since those were the 2 most useful. Anyone who joined the group, child or adult, had to begin at once to learn these basics and to acquire a trade. Anyone who had a trade was always in the process of teaching it to someone else.
The schoolroom at Acorn, the first Earthseed community, serves as the school, library, church, and gathering space. Earthseed gatherings are structured much like a graduate class. One person speaks, then another. Questions are asked. People discuss.
Our gatherings, aside from weddings, funerals, welcomings, or holiday celebrations, are discussions. They're problem-solving sessions. They're times of planning, healing, learning, creating. Times of focusing and reshaping ourselves.
Everyone learns and teaches non-hierarchically. Knowledge is translated horizontally. Here is where Butler's enduring theme of mutual symbiosis is applied to pedagogy. Of course, the novel realizes that in order to survive, knowledge must be passed on. And most importantly, people are reshaped by that knowledge. Like other disabled people, Lauren also dreams of a world where there are more people like her. She does eventually live, amongst other hyper-empaths, in her first Earthseed community, Acorn, and, later, even sends some of them to the stars, as part of the Earthseed destiny. Lauren wants to build a better world, and her disability definitely has something to do with it. In the next episode, we'll hear from more real-life disabled graduate students as they navigate academia. And we'll be answering this question: where are all the ill and disabled academics?
All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God has changed. God has changed. All that you touch, you change. All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. The only lasting truth is God has changed. God has changed. God has changed. God has changed. All that you touch. You touch, you change. You change. All that you touch, you change. All that you change. All that you change, changes you. Changes you. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth. The only lasting truth is change. The only lasting truth is change. God has changed.